You probably know how to build and push container images, but do you know how to manage those images? Do you know how to run a container image registry? Do you know how to run vulnerability scans of your container images? How about signing container images? How about preventing usage of images that are not verified or signed? Or do you know how to replicate container images from or to other registries? Finally, do you know that Docker images are the same as container or OCI images and that you should stop saying Docker images? How about storing Helm charts, binaries, and other artifacts in a container image registry? If you already know all that, go away. Watch something else. But if the answer to any of those questions is no, then you should continue watching. I will answer all those questions except the one why you should stop saying Docker images. That's all stories. I'll do more than that actually. I will show you how to do all that. These days, containers are a standard. You might be running them through Docker, but please do not do that in production. You might be running them in Kubernetes as Google Cloud Run or as Lambda. By the way, now it supports containers as well, as Azure Container Apps, or one of the many other container-based platforms. In some cases, you might even be running containers without even knowing that that's what you're doing. You might be building container images, or you might have a process that does that for you without you even knowing that you're building container images. In any case, you're likely using containers, and for that we need container images, and those images need to be stored somewhere other than your laptop. That's where container image registries come in, and there is one considered a golden standard. Harbor is an open source container image registry that does much more than being a glorified file system where we can store images. So let's see it in action and then discuss whether you should use it, what the pros and cons are, and all the other things that you might need to know. Now, you might be asking, hey, why Harbor? Why not Docker Hub or AWS ECR or Azure Container Registry or Google Container Registry or any other similar solution? We'll talk about that as well. Right now, we will see Harbor in action. We will comment on some of its features while exploring them, and we will do all those things we normally do in this channel. And by the way, TLDR is that Harbor might be much more than you think it is. Let me output the address through which Harbor, which I already installed. I'm saving you from the hassle there. It's in the gist, so you can check how to install it and all the commands I'm running. Anyways, I'm going to output Harbor address and open it in a browser. But before I do that, before I show you Harbor in a browser, I should say that you can run it as a set of Docker containers, or you can deploy it in a Kubernetes cluster. I'm running it in a Kubernetes cluster mostly because that enables high availability or HA, even though this demo is not running in an HA mode. But if you need high availability or HA, run it in Kubernetes or run it anyways. Now let's go to the browser and let me show you what I configured before we start using Harbor. I changed a couple of settings. Nothing major, but it might be important for the rest of the story. So I need to log in, of course, otherwise everybody would be able to access my Harbor. And then I'm going to go to the projects. I'm going to go to DOT or dot project that I created. And over there are settings. Settings are what matters right now. Actually, it's not settings. It is settings, but it's called configuration. Over there we have a couple of important options, and the first one is deployment security. I checked cosign, meaning that my images should be signed for them to be used by anybody. I also stated that vulnerable images should not be runnable because, hey, why would you want to run images as containers if they contain known vulnerabilities? But since I want to go easy on everybody, I said, hey, only if vulnerabilities are high. You shouldn't ignore the rest, but I can forgive you if you do. And in vulnerability scanning, I said, hey, I want you to scan my images automatically. I don't want to deal with that stuff. It should be scanned automatically whenever somebody pushes an image to Harbor, to Docker registry, not Docker container registry. Now, to use Harbor from my laptop, I need to log in to Harbor with command docker login. This is the username, it's admin, and the address is whatever the address is. I'm asked for the password, and then poof, it fails. Now, it shouldn't fail, but it does. And the reason why it fails is because for this demo, I did not set up TLS, I did not set up certificates, so I cannot use HTTPS. When you set it up for real in production, if you choose to do so, you will certainly have certificates and TLS, HTTPS, all the good things, and then you will not have this problem. But in my case, for this demo, I do not have certs, so I will have to execute the same command again, but with insecure registry. Now, bear in mind that I'm not using Docker here. Even though I'm saying Docker, I'm using nerdcutl, which has the argument insecure registry. And if you're wondering how am I using nerdcutl, then let me tell you that I created a alias that says, hey, whenever somebody types Docker, because everybody's used to Docker, it should actually execute nerdcutl. But if you are using Docker and if you're trying it without certs, then there are instructions in the gist how to configure your Docker to speak HTTP instead of HTTPS. And now I can do things that I should do with the container image registry. I should push an image. They say push an image, and I cannot do that without building an image first. This has nothing to do with registry, but I will build an image first with Docker image build. This is the tag, go. And now I can push images just as I would push them to, let's say, Docker Hub, except that this will be going to Harbor, and I will execute command Docker image push. This is the address, and that's it. I mean, address with the full path, including the name of the image and the tag. Now, if I go back to the web UI and to the projects, I can see that within the project DOT there is silly demo, and there is only one artifact because I pushed only one image. I might push more later. I will certainly push more because you will see that I didn't do things the right way from the first attempt, from the get-go. Now that I have my image in Harbor, I'm going to pretend that I'm somebody else on somebody else's computer or laptop, or I could be Kubernetes cluster or any other process. Anyways, I want to see whether I can pull the image, because that's a requirement for me to convert it into a container, and I will do that with Docker image pull. This is the address, full address of that image and the tag, and it fails. But it fails for a very, very good reason, even though it's not obvious what that reason is. It says, hey, 412 precondition failed. There is something wrong. There is something preventing me from using this image. And I can see what's wrong by going back to the web UI, going to that specific tag, and I can see over there that it was not yet signed. If you remember the settings from the beginning of this demo, I said, hey, you absolutely need to sign an image for that image to be used. So I can push images without them being signed, but I said nobody can use unsigned images. So I need to sign the image, push it back, push the signature back to the registry, and then it should be saved because somebody can verify that that image is really what it should be. It was really signed. And I can sign the image with cosign. I could have used notary as well, but today it's cosign. By executing command cosign, I want you to sign an image with this specific key, and this is the fully qualified name of the path or address of the image. And after I type my password, you can see that it is pushing the signature back, or not back, to the registry where the image is stored. Now, if you're not familiar with cosign, there is a video I created watch it. It's not exclusively about cosine, but using cosine with Kyverno, which is a great combination that serves different purpose that is used afterwards when we start running those images as containers in Kubernetes clusters. So we have the problem solved. Now I should probably be able to pull that image, to use the image because it was signed. So let's check it out. Now that the image was signed, proving the identity of the author of that image, I should be able to pull it, right? I can execute something like docker image pull. This is the address of the image, and it fails again. It is still saying precondition failed, and I really dislike this. This is my first complaint or second complaint about Harbor. I would like this error message to be more descriptive, to tell me, hey, why can you not pull this image? What's wrong with it? So I need to double guess, and I can do that by going back to the web UI and seeing whether something fishy is going on over there. And if I go to the details of that specific image tag, at the very bottom, I can see that there are 3 vulnerabilities, 2 of those being high. Now, these are very descriptive vulnerabilities. It tells me, hey, and this is the version of that something, and this is the version that fixes that something. So I'm lucky that fix is already available, and in both cases it is related to the libraries that my application uses. So I will go to, this is Go application, I will go and fix those libraries. Doesn't matter. If you're using some other language, you would get different vulnerabilities, different ways to fix it. What does matter is that I will quickly change the 2 libraries, upgrade them to newer ones that are fixing those vulnerabilities. So I'm opening go.mod, changing the version of one of those libraries, the net library, and then changing the version of the text library, saving the changes, exiting, and now I should be ready to create a new tag with upgraded libraries with hopefully vulnerabilities fixed. So I'm going to build the image with docker image build, and then I'm going to push that image to the registry. This is now tag version 002, and then I'm going to sign the image because by now I know better. I know that I should sign them, and now it should work. And I can double check whether it works by going back to the web UI, back to that tag. You see those 2 tags now. The newer tag 002 says, hey, this one was both signed and there are no vulnerabilities. I can go to the details of that tag, and at the bottom, the vulnerability section is empty. I fixed all 3 vulnerabilities, which is absolutely amazing. So I have signature confirming that it's me who created, built, and pushed that image, and I'm free from all the vulnerabilities. And now, if I pull the image, it should hopefully work. So let me try that with docker image pull. This is the address, this is the tag. I'm using EC2 registry. You shouldn't, because you should be using TLS, and it worked. Now I'm finally able to get the image some other person, imaginary other me, pushed to the registry. Now I'm doing that manually, but the same process, the same issues or potential problems would appear if I did not pull it myself, but try to run it in a Kubernetes cluster or as a Docker container or whatever I'm using it for. The point is that both humans, me, or processes can pull images from Harbor only if they're signed and they have no high vulnerabilities. I could have configured it to behave differently, but this works for me right now. Now, Harbor got some new features delivered only a few days before I started recording this video, sometime in November, I think, 2022, that allow it to manage not only container images, but also Helm charts and some other artifacts. So Harbor is not anymore only and exclusively about container images, but about other stuff, charts, artifacts, what's not, and they can all be converted and stored in Harbor as OCI or container images, even though they're not used as containers. And that's absolutely great, because that allows me to have one registry for potentially everything I need instead of pushing and managing one thing or one type of artifacts here and other type there and so on and so forth. And here comes the story. Ideally, I should not keep the chart somewhere and then deploy that Helm chart by doing something like, hey, Helm upgrade install, and then set image tag to this value and to that value. I should probably store, not probably, I should ideally store the chart with specific tags. So every time I create a new image, I should create or modify my Helm chart and store it with the updated image tag so that somebody can just run that Helm chart, specific version of the Helm chart that already uses specific tag of the image instead of me trying to guess which one I should use. So let's do that. Let me output first Helm values YAML, and over there you can see that I'm not doing much. I have image repository, image tag, ingress host, very few variables. What does matter is that I will replace the tag to be, instead of latest, to be VO2. I would normally do that in a IDE like Visual Studio Code, but today is all about doing stuff from a terminal, so I'm going to execute YQ. I want to replace something in place, and that something is image tag, which should be 002, and I should store the output, read the output and replace it and store it as Helm values. And I will do the same thing for Helm chart YAML. I will change the version of the chart to be 002 as well. Now for me to push this Helm chart, I need to package it. So I'm going to execute the Helm package Helm, which the second Helm is the directory where I have the files. So I created the package, which is just a fancy way to say I created tar gzip, and I will log in to the registry with Helm by executing Helm registry login. This is the address, and now I should be able to push this chart to the registry. And I will do that with Helm push. This is the package, which is tgz, and this is the address, OCI address of the registry that is Harbor and now accepts Helm charts, and that fails. There is a bug in Helm that even though you log in to an insecure registry, you still cannot, at least without some workarounds, push that package to the insecure registry. But I will skip that part. That should be a problem because you will not, if you choose to run Harbor, you will not run it in insecure mode, right? That should be silly, shouldn't it? This is a demo. Insecure is fine in demo, but not in production, not when running it for real, and then you will not have this problem. And now if I was successful in pushing the chart, I should be able to pull it from the registry, or anybody should be able to pull the chart from a registry or use it directly or indirectly, just as you would do it from any other place that stores Helm charts, just as I would do it if I would use Chart Museum, which by the way is part of Harbor for a long time, but now this is alternative and better option to store Helm charts and to manage them. Now let's talk about a few other interesting features in Harbor. If I go to the project, I can see the repositories, I can see the Helm chart, that's logical. I can manage the members, people who can actually push or pull or do both types of operations for this project. I can assign some labels, I can see which scanner is used, and I can change the scanner to something else. But Trivy is great, so use Trivy, assuming that that's how it's pronounced. I can preheat images, I can define policies, I can have robot accounts, robots doing stuff for me. I can have webhooks, which can trigger certain operations. I can see the logs, and finally the configuration that I showed at the very beginning. And all that is on a per project basis. In administration, I can manage most of the same features that are applied or used or defined globally. So we have administration of Harbor itself, and then we have projects, and we can fine-tune how one project behaves depending on the stuff that we define in the administrative section of the web UI. I will not go into all the details of all the administrative things that you can set and how all the variations of how you can manage projects. You should be able to discover that for yourself. Let me skip to the fun part. Let's talk about Harbor, whether you should use it, no, of the pros and cons and all the good things. And now, with Harbor, you have everything you need to store and use container images, Helm charts, cloud native application bundles, and potentially, theoretically, any other type of artifacts. If you set it up correctly, Harbor can be highly available as well. HA, running in multiple replicas. It provides means to sign and scan images for vulnerabilities. It allows us to prevent people and processes from running containers based on container images that were not signed or that have vulnerabilities. Now you might still be wondering why Harbor and why not something else, and you might be the type of the person that is convinced to use one thing or another, not only how it feels, but which features are or are not available. And if you go to the landscape in Harbor documentation, you can see, the link is by the way here in the description, you can see all the features that are available in Harbor and whether those features are available in other container image registries. And the interesting thing here is that you can see that Harbor is more feature rich than any other container image registry. There is none of the other options have all the features that Harbor has. Now, whether you need all of those or no, that's up to you to decide. Anyways, Harbor is absolutely awesome. It is the standard, the golden standard for container image registries, and now not only for container images, but for any other types of artifacts that Harbor will convert into container images for the sake of storing it. So it's awesome and you should use it, but only if for some reason or another you do not want to use a service provided by a cloud provider like AWS CCR, for example, or Docker Hub, or Quay.io, or Artifact Hub, or many other solutions. And you should use it, or you should use it even if you like SaaS and you can afford SaaS if there are special features that you care about, and there are quite a few. So Harbor is a container image registry with authentication, quotas, replication, security scanners. You can choose among, I think, 10 different scanners. It has the ability to store other stuff as OCI images and so on and so forth. But does that mean that everything is great? Well, almost everything is great. There are a couple of things I do not like about Harbor. The first one I already mentioned. When something goes wrong, when it doesn't allow you to pull an image, it doesn't really say what the reason is. Is it because it's not signed, or is it because there are vulnerabilities, or some other reason? The outputs are not really descriptive, and that's kind of bad. Another thing I don't like is that documentation is focused on Docker. And now I'm not saying use or don't use Docker, but some of us prefer running it in Kubernetes, and the documentation are not really good for that use case. There's a lot left to be desired when documentation related to running Harbor in Kubernetes is concerned. Nevertheless, neither of those two negative things are really a big deal. So it's mostly positive, and I will not go into all the details why it's awesome. What I will say is that it is an all-in-one solution. It is registry for different types of artifacts. It has vulnerability scanning, it has signing, authentication, and so on and so forth. So if you need a registry to store stuff, and not only container images, but even other types of artifacts like Helm charts, Harbor is a great choice. It is the de facto standard. It has almost everything or everything you might need, and you should use it, but only if you cannot use SaaS solutions, because SaaS is still better, not because other solutions, software as a service solutions, are better than Harbor. They're actually not, but because it's easier when somebody else takes care of running stuff for you. As a matter of fact, quite a few SaaS solutions are based on Harbor. So you might be using it without even knowing. Anyways, let me know what you think. Let me know which solution you're using to store and manage and pull from and push to container images, right? What is your container image registry, and whether you use it only for container images or for other types of artifacts as well. See you next time. Cheers.